Hi, I'm Jen Ong, the founder of Gen TV, a digital TV channel that produces talk shows to educate, empower, and inspire our viewers. You'll be watching some inspiring stories that will be starting soon. Please share this with your friends and families to inspire more people. Founder of Gen TV, a digital TV channel that produces talk shows to educate, empower, and inspire our viewers. You'll be watching some inspiring stories that will be starting soon. Please share this with your friends and families to inspire more people. Stay tuned with us.
Welcome back to Live the Stage with me, Frida Liu and Gen TV. I'm going to call this three-parter Sustainability at Heart. Why? When we think of sustainability, we think of things like climate action and the environment. However, Sustainable Development Goal number 3 is about good health and well-being, where we look towards ensuring healthy lives and promote well-being of all ages. And this is well-being in the head and well-being in the body, right? My guests today are some of the inspiring speakers and trainers who did just that and stood up for others, assist in raising funds for people in need, help uplift people's morale and mood while reviving their own business and reinventing themselves. And they will have interesting stories to tell, I can assure you that. My first guest is a Canadian TEDx speaker and former elite figure skating choreographer to world and Olympic champions. Kevin Cottam's non-conformist and Zen-like quiet authority, powerful presence, and unique global living experiences captivates and inspires his audiences to never settle for too long and continually step into their courage and values. He shares how leaders and managers can learn from semi-nomadic tribes in Mongolia, Kenya, and Morocco. And he says you can learn from nomadic mindset, which very neatly brings me to my next guest. And of course, before I talk about the next guest, Kevin, I had an opportunity to meet him many years ago talking about this very thing. Now, Kevin calls Fredrik Haren his mentor and worked and traveled with him to Mongolia and discovering and developing the nomadic mindset. His book of creative solutions shocks and wows the crowd now more than ever before humanity needs to find imaginative solutions for our survival and vitality on this planet. Fredrik, also known as the Creativity Explorer, is considered one of the top speakers in the world about business, creativity, disruption, and change. And he's currently finishing writing an exciting novel that will hopefully become a big success movie. And of course, I've seen Fredrik's videos, and it's very interesting how his mind works. So it's going to be an exciting session here today. But I have to ask both of you as well, right? Your immediate reaction when you first heard of the pandemic and it finally hit our shores, Kevin in Singapore, and of course, Fredrik, wherever you were at that moment. We'll start with you, Kevin.
When I was here, I was just wondering, oh, what is this? And then the other part is that I ended up going to Namibia and I was barely getting out of Namibia just in time to get back to Singapore. And I thought, oh, now we're really into it. And then I just sort of thought, I'm going to watch it and see what happens, because I was in such a Zen mood from doing research in Namibia. I thought, oh, I don't know what this COVID is. I just let it hang for a while and just sort of see what's going on and live in the gap, as they say.
Right, right. So always nomadic, always Zen-like. And I'll want to find a little bit about Namibia in just a moment. What about you, Frederick?
Well, yeah. So I was in Singapore, and the fascinating thing with being in Singapore when it comes to pandemic is that Singapore, we got it, one of the first countries outside China to get it and to react to it. And it was like living in a time machine, because you were talking to your friends in America or in Europe and saying, okay, this is going to happen. And they had no clue. And then 1 month later, like 1 month after Singapore was hoarding toilet paper, Europe and America was holding toilet paper. So everything happened like 1 month after. It was so strange to see how the same event could play out in different time, like 1 calendar month later in other parts of the world.
Right.
So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, we realized that you can't do without toilet paper. It's called water. So no, just I've got some questions, but Namibia, this is a part of your research again, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, last year I decided to go to Namibia, and I was actually attending a Plan B conference because it was canceled, and then it was on again. But at the same time, I had planned to do some research with the Himba and the Bushmen of the Kalahari, and it was fascinating to do so. And I was ahead of COVID. It's like it was chasing the rest of the world, and I was ahead of it, and there was nothing happening in Namibia at that time. And then when I was to arrive back, it was like, oh, you're isolated. The president said we are stopping any planes coming in and out, and I'm going, how am I going to get out? Anyway, I got out.
Okay, and you got out, right. So, okay, so, I've spoken to you many years ago, but tell me about this nomadic mindset. You learn from the tribes of Mongolia, Kenya, Morocco, and we always think, I have to be somewhere else to be a nomad.
Yeah, I mean, I want to just share, the first thing is most people say to me, oh, I love traveling, so I must have a nomadic mindset. And I say, not necessarily.
Right.
And, I mean, a nomadic mindset is a much more holistic mindset, of which it is a freedom of flow. It's the movement of the mind. And I would say the mind, the 3 different minds of the mind, the head and the heart and the gut. And it's a freedom of flow, as I say, through all of those, is being able to freely flow, to see a variety of pastures and possibilities and opportunities in any sort of aspect. And so, in other words, not really getting crazed and chasing things, but just to watch stuff happen and let it reveal, and then to be able to move when you need to move.
Right.
And so that's really the nomadic mindset. And so it's not necessarily about travel. It certainly is part of it. However, it's not essentially the travel.
Right. And it's so interesting, right? I think that mindset really came into effect because of the pandemic.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, now we get into this piece with Fredrik, right? And so how this all sort of came about. And I will share with you that is that it really came about in 2017 when I first started to work with Fredrik, and I was looking for a subject to speak about. And I said, I'm a global nomad. And he says, what's this nomad? I'm interested in this nomad. What does it mean? And so he started to look it up on his phone. What does it mean? And whatever. And so we started discovering, and he said, this is a fantastic idea and thought. I've never really heard about this. And so anyway, he said, you need to go research. And I went, oh. And I remember the feeling inside of me just dropped. And so he said, you need to go and spend time with 3 nomadic cultures. And as well as, because it's a business book, it's a leadership book, is with executives. And so I did. And that's how the nomadic mindset came about. And he said, what's the name of the book? I said, it's the nomadic mindset.
Okay. Fredrik, your work as a creativity explorer, and I've watched a number of your videos, but what has just, caught your attention so much about creativity and what it aims to resolve?
You mean specifically around the pandemic?
Well, just know what you're doing right now as a creativity explorer, and you can connect it back to the pandemic, of course.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I've been studying creativity for more than 20, almost 25 years. But for the last 5 years, I kind of realized that I want to study it in the more unexpected places. And then that's how I kind of transitioned into the creativity explorer. So now the last couple of years, I went to North Korea to study how do the North Koreans look at creativity. I went to the slums of Mumbai to interview the people who live there. How do they look at creativity? Or artists in Afghanistan. And like I still go to Silicon Valley and interview like heads of innovation and the traditional way of looking at innovation. But I also wanted to learn from the people we never talked to about innovation. How do they look at creativity? What can we learn from that culture or
Right.
that people or whatever they are? So I broadened my scope on what creativity is, and it became much more rewarding, my work. It's been a wonderful journey.
Okay, and I saw this video of you together with Ray Mark, the pianist, and how he can listen to music,
Yeah.
and there was a whole thing about patterns, which is very interesting, right? And
Yes.
when you look at patterns, just is your story, right? Creativity, what you said, creativity in North Korea and creativity in the slums of Mumbai or innovation. What did you learn from them?
Specifically North Korea or
both? Yeah.
Okay, so generally, I've learned that the more different kinds of people I talk to about creativity, the more I understand that there's so many different facets of creativity. Sometimes we talk about creativity as if it would be one thing, which is very unfair to creativity, because creativity is all about doing different things in different ways. Right. And what I've learned is that I kind of compare it to food. So like food is food, but Korean food is different from Chinese food, which is different from French food. And if you realize that, you realize you can learn something about food from Korea and something about food from France. And that's kind of how I'm looking at creativity now, that there are many, many, many facets about how different cultures approach creativity. And the more curious we are about finding these nuances, the more dishes, so to speak, we can create when it comes to being creative. So maybe one day you say, today I think I should use the Chinese approach to creativity, or today I'll add a little bit of Italian creativity to it, and so on. Right. So just like we have fusion cooking, we can have fusion mindset towards creativity, and it becomes much more fun and exciting and much more things to discover.
Right. And I guess like right now, when you're having these conversations with organizations or individuals, how do they see this being applied to their lives or organizations in this period?
This is a very interesting period, because I think a lot of people went into kind of first, a lot of people got afraid, and afraid is normally not a good place to be if you want to be creative. It could be for some people, like for example, when we have a big problem, sometimes we become very creative. It's the Apollo 13 phenomena. We have some people in the middle of nowhere, suddenly an oxygen tank explodes and we need to solve the problem. So sometimes problem can trigger creativity, but for most people, most of the time, our best ideas come when we are relaxed by ourselves, not stressed, not forced to be creative. And I think it took a while for people to get past the afraid stage and then go into realizing, okay, this is what and I think now you can feel that a lot of people have this built up creativity coming out. We can compare it to the last pandemic. The 1920s was a very, very creative time, and it happened just after the pandemic. So I think we're going to have a similar time coming now, and it's going to be very exciting.
Right. Okay. I love your view of how usually during periods of Great Depression, after World War II, there was a lot more creativity after these sort of things happen. And like we always say, you either fight, freeze, or you can choose to flourish during that period, right? Kevin, your mantra of moving on, it's not about running away or escaping, right? And it is about running towards your learning, growth, expressing your excellence so you can thrive. I think, how do you go about doing that? And why do we feel like running away, though? Because I know I do sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all do. And I think that that's a lot to do with external referrals. So in other words, what the external world is actually sharing with us that this is wrong. And so we need to look back. I mean, running back or running away from is actually fear. And it's a lot to do with what Fredrik was speaking about. And it's also running away from taking risk. And if you think about facing a lion, for example, as the Maasai will do, is they don't run away from the lion because the lion will kill them. Right. And it's the same thing. If you run away from something, it's still going to be there, and it might get bigger and larger, and then you'll be paralyzed. And that's what sometimes has happened with, people within COVID. Instead of moving towards, taking one small step towards where you need to go. And And that takes the ability of being creative in many ways.
Right.
And
Right.
it's a very strong link, is that, and if I link that again, it's also into what Fredrik is talking is very nomadic, is as that fluidity of looking at different pathways and getting curious. It's all about curiosity. And moving forward, for example, running towards is really about understanding six principles that I found with nomadic cultures. And that is being silent and still and alert at the same time, curious at the same time, intuitive at the same time, observant at the same time, and also, I think, what was the last one that I left out? So I think it's about, I said intuitive, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, and
Right.
there's one more, I'll get it back again. But those are so important. And I believe that that's exactly where we're at right now, and which helps that creativity, that innovation. It allows us to be able to move forward instead of running behind, because running behind, as I say, is actually moving backwards. It's a past referral. It's where our comfort zone is. It's about, I don't want to move out of that. And COVID has shifted us and said, this is uncomfortable. We need to figure out how to live in this uncomfortable period. And hopefully people will learn new strategies, new habits, new ways forward, so that they're able to be, as Fredrik says, creative and on so many different levels.
Right. The first one was very interesting, to be silent and to be still, which is so difficult.
Yeah, I mean, so I compare it again to the situation of facing a lion, and this is exactly what the Maasai have told me. Okay, so when they face a lion, they have to move into the breath of the lion. They keep their eyes on the lion, so they're always 360 degrees observant. They're still. They have to be still, because if they make any sort of untoward move, the lion will move, because they're afraid. In many ways, and so being alert is like ready to move at any time. They have their spear and they have their red shuka, and the red shuka means that the lion is afraid of red, they say. And so, but being still, you need to go into that breath and to match the breath on the other side.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, I guess, like, during this period as well, when the pandemic hit, and what did I do? Of course, you just observe what's going on, and it is happening. You can only protect yourself as much as possible, but then you also work towards building your immunity and then strengthening your immunity as much as possible, right? I think that's it's in the air. So, but what can I do? I can only look at, improving my, as much as I can protect myself, also just improve my immunity. Now, Kevin, people who live in small homes, say in Hong Kong, and I guess some parts of Singapore as well, how is it possible to develop a nomadic mindset where your physical space seems so confined?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it's often the situation. I think that the small spaces are challenging because they close us in. And let me bring you back to a quote that I was told in Mongolia, Fredrik. And when we were in Mongolia, one young girl said to me, she said, "Nomads think vastly, act narrowly." So in other words, they think very vastly. If they're in a confined space, like in a yurt, it doesn't have a lot of stuff in it, but it's confined. But if they go outside, it's very vast. But their thinking pattern is wide before it goes narrow. Wide before it goes narrow. And most of us, it's very narrow. My coaching clients, they come in narrow, and you have to sort of pull them apart to get them to go wide. So living in smaller spaces, we need to have this wide vision. It's the mindset. But we also need to get out. And you need to go out into nature. You need to go out onto the streets. You need to go out into the parks. You need to discover. This will give us that extra breath. And it comes down to breathing a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, we can all have small spaces, but we can still have a nomadic mindset by just moving around.
Right. Okay.
Expanding.
Right. And okay. And I like that, right? Go. you're right. When we have a problem, we can only look at it this way. But and your goal would then to say that there are actually a lot more things out there if we don't just sort of focus on the small things as well. Fredrik, your conversations with companies right now, right? You've been talking about creativity, disruption, and change, and I think people finally paying more serious attention about that. What are organizations? What kind of conversations are you having with organizations now?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that there's a huge difference. Some industries have been doing so well during the pandemic, and their problem is trying to keep up with all the orders. And then, of course, many organizations have been struggling very much, and all they want to do is just try to figure out a way to survive. And I think it's important to understand that we're still in the pandemic, and many countries and many companies are still suffering very, very badly from this. And it might seem like, oh, how can we talk about creativity when we have all these catastrophes going on? Right. But when I'll bring up those girls I interviewed in the slums of Mumbai, because that's actually a very good example. The way they approached creativity was that they say, okay, fine, we're living in a very, very bad place, but we can't focus on the fact that it's bad. It is what it is. And then say, we need to accept where we are and then try to make the best out of that situation where we are. And I think that's the difference between creative people and not creative people. It's not that creative people are living in a perfect world. It's that they live in a world where they say, okay, I identify a problem. How can I solve the problem? And when we talk about Apollo 13, there's this famous saying that Houston, we have a problem. It's usually what people think they said. Right. But actually what they did say is, Houston, we had a problem. So as soon as they realized that the oxygen tank had exploded, and the first thing they said when they called back to Houston, when they get radio contact again, was we had a problem. And then they moved straight into, okay, how can we solve this problem? And I think this is the difference between organizations that have managed well and organizations who don't. Okay, fine, we have a pandemic, good. And then let's move on and say, how can we now solve whatever problem that has created? And now you're in problem solving mode, which is a much better place to be in than being stuck in a problem. That's not where you want to identify the problem, but you don't want to be stuck in the problem. You want to be in the face of, how can I now solve whatever problem you have? It can be big or it can be small.
Right. And you talk a lot about a global mindset, right? What is this global mindset? And it's not the fact that you've traveled a lot, but I know you have, but what is this global mindset that we should adopt?
Well, actually, it's a human mindset. So that's actually what it's all about. And I think a lot of people, we all know we have different identities. Like I'm myself, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a Swede, I live in Singapore, and so on. And you can be a Muslim or a Christian, you can, whatever, you have a bunch of different identities, but very few people would actually identify or put the identity human being at the very top. And when we do that, something fundamental changes in how we approach almost anything. And I think the best thing that the pandemic has taught us is that the virus couldn't care less what nationality. So I'm very happy we changed this idea of the Indian variant to the Delta variant, because it's not an Indian variant. It's now everywhere and it's spreading, and it doesn't care. Right? This is a human problem, and humanity went together to try to solve it. Not as much as we should have, but imagine if we would have. Imagine if all the countries would have said, oh, who's dealing with this best? If Sweden would have said, oh, Singapore is dealing with the pandemic this way. What can we learn about Singapore? Instead, we went into this nationalistic thing of saying, how can my country solve the virus? Which, of course, is going to lose against the virus that couldn't care less about national borders. So the more we think about humanity and what we can do together to solve problems together, the better. And I think humanity might have learned a lesson here. I really hope so.
Right. Okay. I just want to go back to an earlier point that Kevin said. You talk about the going wide and looking in a vast and then narrow, right? A situation where you've had with a client, and like you said, most clients come in looking narrow, and then how do you an example of someone you spoke to who then looked at something I think that's what we need to look at. The reason I'm getting to that is that because people just can't see beyond 3 feet in front of them right now.
Yeah, I think that, if I lap onto what Fredrik was talking about, is the stuckness. But a lot of people get into the stuck and start seeing things from a very narrow situation. So, for example, recently, a lot of people have been having problems, with the point of no time. And so consequently, the leaders that I work with, they say, I don't have time to reflect. And I say, well, what will happen if you don't take the time to reflect. And then they start going into these thoughts and ideas of what could happen. So in other words, it starts to expand them and let them go wider, which is what the Nomad does. And this is what creativity does, is what Fredrik was just talking about, is about allowing that expansion to happen and to see, okay, this is a problem, but okay, now what's the solution? And that's exactly what I noticed about nomadic cultures is they may have a problem, but they don't waste too much time about it. They find what is the answer. So in other words, it's about getting curious as a coach, and it's about being able to get the right questions to really expand. Now, one of the things that happens with this is there's also a bouncing effect, right? Because there's nothing linear with this. It's to go wide or to find another solution. Is it bouncing? And that is what reflection is in many ways, is being able to reflect and bounce back and forth. It's bouncing back the light waves, and literally, but it's that conversation with the coach. And that helps that individual to really find that expansion. And I have to say that's by in these situations of variety, they're able to move very quickly. And they're also able to, because I also talk about values. And so the values then help them as well. So it's that combination of what, Fredrik is really talking about in creativity, and what's been happening is those that have been able to quickly become alert, quickly get curious, then they're able to move. Because it's all about movement.
Right. So long as we keep moving right forward. Right now, Fredrik, you're now living on an island where you make your own water, electricity, and hot water. Why are you doing this, and how long did this project take you?
Well, yes, you might hear the seagulls and the waves in the background. So yes, I am sitting on an island. Okay, here we go. There we go. That's my view. And I live here 2 months per year every year. Actually, because of the pandemic, we are now living here for 4 months because we couldn't go last summer. So we're having COVID revenge. We're doubling down this summer. And the idea of living 2 months on an island, isolated from the rest of the world, literally, is because we're talking about this time to reflect, time to think, right? That's the whole idea, that you actually have your best ideas when you're by yourself. So that's why I live on an island. And then when we got the island, I said, okay, why don't we try to make it, because it's an island, you could do it differently. So this is the wireless island. There's no wires on it. There's no water cable. There's no electricity cable. So I make my own drinking water from salt water using the solar cells, so solar powered electricity. I haven't paid an electric bill in 20 years, which is an amazing feeling. But I do, but also for trash, for example, any trash that you create when you are on an island, you have to take off the island, or you have to get rid of it by yourself. So you become very aware, especially when you make your own drinking water. We make 1 liter per minute. So it's like a trickle. Right. So you get very aware of what water is and the value of it. You get very aware of what trash is and that you need to take care of it. You become much more aware of food, for example, anything. You become much more aware of what it is, how valuable it is, and what part you play in the rest of the environment, so to speak. So sometimes I think about Earth as the human island. Basically, it's a very tiny little island floating around in a vast sea of space. And if we would think of Earth as an island, we would have a different. This goes back to the humanity aspect. We would think of it differently if we all thought we're living on this tiny island together. Because you wouldn't think twice about helping someone who is on the same island as you if the island is small enough. But and Earth is really tiny. We could have the human island mentality. We would think differently about how we spend resources and who we help and how we help people around the world.
Right. Okay. So it's been 20 years that you've had this island.
Yes, but only 2 months per year. So only in the summer. So technically, I've only been on the island for 4 years.
Right. So how do you get rid of trash? That's an interesting one.
Oh yeah, so we do composting for anything that can be composted. We compost, including toilet waste and everything like this. Right. So And we are also very conscious about what we buy. We grow some of our own food, not a lot, but some of it. And we're very conscious about what kind of what the package that the food comes in, to make sure we're not buying stuff with unnecessary packaging and so on.
Right. It's so
Because
interesting,
I know
right?
whatever I bring on the island in my small rowing boat, I also have to row away from the island, and I don't like the rowing too much. So.
Okay, but so it's so interesting. Sometimes we can talk about it until we live it, then we realize the impact that we actually have, right? Or the impact that we make, positive or negative, right? Another question is, obviously a lot of us have been thrown out of our comfort zone. And as I was saying, do you fight, or freeze, right? And maybe just to encapsulate again, right? How do you see the nomadic mindset helping people now that they've been thrown out of the comfort zone, and of course with creativity as well? What can we do during this period? So I'll get Kevin to speak first.
Sure. I think that the whole point about the nomadic mindset is this freedom of flow of movement. And what happens is, with most of us in our minds and our lives and the way we are taught and whichever, we get into a stuckness and we get into a settling thinking of everything is comfortable and whichever. And it's this discomfort which allows the creativity to come out. It allows that boldness, it allows that inventiveness, it allows you to move in different directions. And I think that's very important. I think the other point is that the one of the six that I forgot was listen. And I think that works nicely into this, is that we need to listen a lot more. And that's one of the things the nomadic mindset is doing, is listening, not only internally, but externally and everywhere. It's finding all sorts of sounds and noises and what are those? And I think that we need to be able to listen much better than we do. And that will help us to expand, which will be able then to stop us blocking, which will then lead into the creativity that Fredrik is talking about. We'll be able to really move.
Right. Fred.
Yeah. Can I add to that? So sure. I think that this idea that we have fight, flight, or freeze, I think is very dangerous. I would like to add one. We're faced with a problem, let's say a lion, we have fight, flight, freeze, or create. And I just saw a post a couple of days ago about this one guy somewhere in Africa who had learned how to give foot massages to lion. And every time that the lion saw him, they just rolled down, lay down on their back and put their feet in the air, because they just love the foot massage. So that's a fourth way of dealing with a lion. You're not running away, you're not freezing, or you're not fighting the lion, you're giving it a foot massage. And I think that's kind of how we approached the pandemic in my family. The first thing we said, me and my wife, when we realized this is going to be a tough year, we said our children are going to remember the pandemic as the happiest time of their life. And everything we've done the last 18 months have been focused on, is this the best for our kids right now? And that's why we are on the island for 5 months. We took the kids out of school and we're homeschooling them, because we said they should remember that they had the longest summer vacation. Because when you homeschool on an island, even if they go to school, it feels like they're on a summer vacation. And they will look back on the pandemic, because they're young kids, they're like 6, 8, and 10. They will look back at the pandemic as the happiest summer of their lives. And that's because we didn't do the first three. We did the fourth one, which is to create. We gave our children a foot massage, so to speak.
Right. So I was going to, this is my question about serendipity, right? And how that's been described as finding good without looking for it. And I was going to ask, how has the last 2 years been serendipitous, for you? And so I love that story, Fredrik, and then the kids will say the pandemic was the best time in their lives, right? And you can add on to that if you want. But Kevin, how has this been, serendipitous for you?
I think it's been serendipitous in a lot of things. It's because it's allowed me to explore and to see and to observe that everything that is in front of me is a possibility, is an opportunity, is a seed. And so I look at everything as, what is that? Why is it here in front of me? What do I need to listen from it? What do I need to observe from it? And I think that that's one of the biggest things. And one of the things that happened during COVID was, because I like to give back to the cultures, especially the Maasai and the children of the Maasai, is that I did a GoFundMe to help them. And so that was very serendipitous that gave me that movement to do that. And at the same time, help them in their education. But I think that it's really been a serendipitous time to look deeper. And it's allowed me to see everything as an opportunity, even if I didn't take it, but question. So it's a lot of questioning.
Right. Okay. Just to share, what is the situation with the Maasai children?
Well, the Maasai children, I mean, now who knows? I mean, the situation in Kenya is up and down. They don't have a lot of vaccinations. But the children often have problems with the education because they don't have enough money to go. Because Maasai people, their wealth is their cows, and if the cows can't get to market, then they don't have any money to survive. And so then, if they don't have money to survive, then they have to find it somehow. And so I was able to do that, and but I was grateful to give back. The children therefore they don't have enough money to send their children to school, so therefore they need to be sponsored. And so that is what I've also done with the people that have been very generous to me in helping me with my research. And so it's my way of giving back to them.
Right. If you, for me, I think like during this period was just a case of nowhere else, there hasn't been a moment when everyone is on a standstill, right? It was just there was time for reflection, which I appreciated, and I actually realized that I liked myself very much, right? And that was good, and I wasn't on the go because everybody was quiet, and that to me I found has been good in the last 2 years. Final question: your word of advice for those who say, I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, this must be some sort of conversation that you're having with people. Fredrik, what's your advice?
Yeah, and I totally get that. My advice to people who can see the light at the end of the tunnel, I would say, look for the light in the cave, because if it feels like you're not in it, it feels like you're in the cave.
Okay.
But because I can be honest, I mean, my business for the last 10 years has been to travel around the world and do speeches, and that industry is one of the most hit in the world. It just didn't happen. And I could say, okay, so I could get all upset about, oh no, I don't get to travel around the world and speak anymore. Or I could say, oh, look at this, I'm going to get more time with my kids who are very young. And everyone who's a parent says, I wish I spent more time with my kids when they were young. Right. And I say, oh, look at this, what a gift. It's not positive thinking. I call it beautiful thinking. You look at how the world looks, regardless how dark it is, and you say, what beautiful thing can I find in this situation I'm in? And then you focus on this a little bit, because it creates something for you to cling on to. It's opposite from, it's not positive thinking. Positive thinking is like someone stabs you in the foot and say, oh my God, someone stabbed me in the foot. How great. That's different. You're not supposed to paint it beautifully, but there's always something beautiful in the world. You look at the people who survived concentration camps. The reason they did that, it was they were able to focus on something in that world that was beautiful, even if that was a bird singing outside the camp or whatever it is. Because humanity thrives on this. We need to cling on to the things that give us hope. That's what makes us human.
Right. Okay. To look at, it's not about optimism, but it's about looking at the beautiful side of things. I like that. Right. Kevin?
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of when my mother was telling me stories of it being in World War II in London. And she said that when the sirens used to go, that they had to get everybody and the dogs and everyone down into the basements, into the and everybody. And they were there with all of their neighbors. And so they were all together. And she said it was so much fun. They had so much laughter, and because they needed to make a world of that self. They knew that this was just normal. But they knew that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And this light at the end of the tunnel, as far as I'm concerned, is very similar to Fredrik, is that within darkness, there is light. And it's that light that we forget to reframe to look at. We're framing on the dark instead of reframing it to look on the light. And that is what is not necessarily just a positive, but it is all of what can be. And that is one of the things that I invite people to do, is to go nomadic. When I say go nomading, is in your mind or in on your walks or your thoughts. Just allow yourself the freedom of thought, and just get rid of your phones and get rid of even having conversation with the friend that you're walking with, but just observe and go nomading with them. Just be with them. And all of these gives you light, because that is part of the world is there's so much light in in life. And I think that, the press and everything wants us to look at the dark side, so many things. And so we need to reframe that. And that is the moving towards, that running towards is reframe instead of running away from. And so, yeah, go nomading, folks.
And it's so interesting because I work for a media organization, and I am bombarded with negativity, right? This is the part of work, and I really have to consciously look for the positive and look for the beautiful. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your wisdom and spending your time with us. Kevin on Singapore Island, Fredrik on a Finnish island, and me on a fake island. Thank you so much for watching Live to Stage with me, Frida Liu and Gen TV, and this has been the Sustainability at Heart series. You can always catch past episodes of the show right here on Gen TV. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you for watching Gen TV, a digital TV channel featuring compelling interviews on life, parenting, entrepreneurship, women empowerment, and the realities of living. If you're interested to produce this kind of talk shows, do drop us a message here on our FB or send us a WhatsApp message at the numbers below. We will be in touch with you soon. Follow us on Gen TV FB for more interesting and inspiring stories.